What's good? It's Woog. Vergil Ortiz Jr. is about to return to the ring after about a year and a half of inactivity due to overactivity. Let me explain. Well, first, we've got a fight coming up involving Vergil Ortiz Jr., and Vergil Ortiz's record is 19 wins and 0 losses. His opponent, Fredrick Lawson, is 30-3. And although I will give my pick on who I think is going to win the fight, this is more a question of where Vergil Ortiz Jr. is health-wise. Now, Vergil Ortiz Jr. had probably the most disappointing 2023, and quite frankly, most concerning and scariest 2023 among elite fighters. And, you know, Vergil Ortiz, he is still a young man. He's 25 years old still. And when a lot of us first saw him, he was just ripping through these former champs and former contenders, journeymen, and so forth. He destroyed Mauricio Herrera, Antonio Orozco, Brad Solomon, Samuel Vargas. And then he had the 2 step-up fights against Maurice Hooker and Mean Machine Kavaliauskas, stopping them both. In fact, he's got a 100% knockout ratio, although he did take some heavy fire from Mean Machine Kavaliauskas. He got hurt a couple times early in that fight. That was actually a fun fight to rewatch. And then he was scheduled to fight Michael McKinson. And that was the first time that it was revealed to the public, at least, that he had this rhabdomyolysis condition, which forced him to withdraw from the McKinson fight and then reschedule it. So it was rescheduled for August of 2022. Vergil Ortiz makes it to the fight. He finishes McKinson in like the 9th round of a 12-round fight. And at that point, it had been a year between the Mean Machine fight and the Michael McKinson fight. Whereas, you know, in 2019, he fought 4 times. And in like 2021, he fought twice against Maurice Hooker and against Mean Machine. So, you know, Vergil Ortiz, I always saw as being one of the most promising young talents in the sport. I mean, the guy's a good boxer. He's a ferocious puncher. Like, there is just so much zip on his punches, or as the UK boxing community likes to say, there's a lot of spite on his punches. And this was evident when he first fought like Mauricio Herrera a few years ago. So I looked at him as being one of the most promising young talents, you know, right there with, you know, Boots Ennis. And, you know, at the time, David Benavidez. Benavidez has obviously done a lot more in the past year to 2 years, not, you know, and it was a 2-time WBC champ before that. So he was way more proven than Vergil Ortiz. But Vergil Ortiz was just one of the must-see fighters in the sport. And I was really excited to see how far he could take it in the welterweight division. But then after the McKinson fight, he was supposed to fight Stanionis, and that was supposed to be for like a vacant regular WBA welterweight title. That's the lesser of the titles because, you know, obviously Errol Spence had the other 3 belts going into his fight with Terrence Crawford, who at the time only had the WBO belt. So Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Stanionis was supposed to happen. And this was one of the most exciting fights, matchups on paper, because we've seen Stanionis, you know, beat Thomas Delorme. We saw him beat Butayev to earn, you know, that lesser title. So it was one of those, something's got to give between, you know, the fact that they are both excellent jabbers, both Vergil Ortiz and Stanionis. Plus, they both have withering left hooks. Like, I do think that Vergil Ortiz's left hook might be a little more fierce, but I was really looking forward to seeing that fight. Now, it had got canceled 3 times, once due to Stanionis pulling out because he had to have an emergency appendectomy, and then the other 2 times it was postponed, it was because of Vergil Ortiz's rhabdomyolysis during his training camp. And the second of those Vergil Ortiz withdrawals, it was very concerning because he actually fainted. He collapsed and was, you know, taken to the hospital. And this was like within a week or so of the fight. So this was very concerning news, to the point where there was a big question on whether he could even, you know, continue with his young boxing career. I mean, this is no joke. I mean, if you look up what rhabdomyolysis does and how it kind of attacks one's own body, look, I still don't know if this is going to work out. I'm just holding out hope at this point. And, you know, I listened to a Vergil Ortiz interview with Dan Rayfield like a couple of days ago, and he sounded optimistic. You know, he's also back with his old trainer, Robert Garcia. I always liked that tandem. I don't know exactly why he left Robert Garcia to work with Manny Robles, but he's back with Robert Garcia. And he sounded optimistic about his health. And now he's going up to 154 to fight Fredrick Lawson. So he's saying that he feels a lot better. He says that he hasn't felt this good since he was at his best. And he considers his best to be that 2019 year against Herrera, Orozco, Brad Solomon, Samuel Vargas, or when he was fighting on like Canelo versus Triple G undercards just prior to that. He says that he feels great, but I haven't heard any scientific evidence that backs up him having this rhabdomyolysis under control. Like, it sounds like maybe because he's not cutting as much weight, or because, the Stanionis fight was, rescheduled a couple of times, that he was in these long training camps that were much longer than usual. So he says that it was the duration of his training camp, and he thinks that that's the reason why his body started to fail him. Okay, maybe that's the case, but that at this point is just a theory. It's a non-scientific theory. Again, I'm hopeful that Vergil Ortiz is able to have the career that he's meant to have. Like, I want to see how far he could push his talents. And, if there was a prop bet on whether he even makes it to the ring in this fight against Fredrick Lawson, I think that those odds would be closer than if he does make it to the ring, whether he beats Fredrick Lawson. I have almost no doubt that if Vergil Ortiz Jr. is still Vergil Ortiz Jr., he should beat Fredrick Lawson. Not to downplay Fredrick Lawson's talents. I mean, he's 30-3 with 22 knockouts. He's a fighter from Ghana who resides in Chicago. He's, fought a couple decent fighters. He lost to Charles Hatley. You might remember Charles Hatley got stopped by Jermell Charlo back in the day. He also got stopped by Juan Ruiz. Those are two of his 3 losses. He's beaten Breidis Prescott, where, I mean, if you look at Breidis Prescott's like fight history, yes, he was once a pretty good fighter, but if you look at like the last several years of his career, I wonder how he still has a license to fight. Like, he's gone on like 10 fight losing streaks or something crazy like that. You just look at either his box rec or his Wikipedia. Breidis Prescott fought way longer than he should have been fighting, and Fredrick Lawson basically beat that version of Breidis Prescott. But I don't have much doubt on whether Vergil Ortiz can beat Fredrick Lawson. Again, I have more doubt, odds-wise, probability-wise, on whether in these last few days of training camp, if Vergil Ortiz's body is still able to be okay and allow him to enter the ring against Fredrick Lawson. And that's a very concerning thing to consider, because, okay, if he gets through this fight, who's to say that this same, condition doesn't creep up later? So yeah, look, I'm holding out hope. I really, really hope for the best when it comes to Vergil Ortiz's health, first and foremost, and then secondarily, his boxing career. And like I said, he's now a 154 fighter, which is unfortunate because I really wanted to see how he could do against the cream of the crop at 147. No, I didn't think he was ever going to fight one or both, like Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford. Like, those two guys had to get it on. And it looks like I don't know. I think that they're supposed to have a rematch. As far as I know, they're supposed to have a rematch. But at the time, another concern that I had was that, Vergil Ortiz was on Golden Boy. So who were they going to match him up with? Like, without having to do, cross promotional stuff. Like, to be honest, like at the times, let's say like 2020, 2021, I was thinking, okay, who could they match Vergil Ortiz up with? And then I thought maybe Conor Benn, because both Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, and Oscar De La Hoya Golden Boy are with DAZN. I'm thinking maybe they could get that one together. But I was also thinking, man, Eddie Hearn is not going to let Conor Benn anywhere near Vergil Ortiz Jr. And then, obviously Conor Benn, pop positive for steroids and has had difficulty getting his career back on track and getting any more meaningful fights. And we'll see if Conor Benn continues to campaign at 147. But Vergil Ortiz is now at 154, so we haven't gotten to see Vergil Ortiz versus Boots Ennis, versus Conor Benn, versus Stanionis, versus any Cody Crowley, any of these, just outside of the top 2, Keith Thurman, any of these elite or near elite 147 guys. Although I do think that Boots Ennis will be at 154. I suspect that he will be at 154 sooner than later. But here's another thing to consider with Vergil Ortiz now that he's at 154. when he was at 147, he was kind of a big 147. He's 5'10 with a 71-inch reach. Errol Spence is about 5'10. You know, Errol Spence has a 72-inch reach. So Vergil Ortiz was right around the same dimensions as Errol Spence. So, you know, he's not a croucher, but he does tuck his chin. He kind of keeps his shoulders high. And so he kind of has like a lankier frame. But again, he's got these ferocious punches. So he was able to get a lot of leverage on these often shorter fighters, like when he was fighting Mean Machine. Maurice Hooker was a taller guy, but a lot of his opponents were an inch or two shorter than him. So he was able to really lean into some of those body shots, those crushing left hooks to the body and his straight rights. But now at 154, the guys who are the top 10 in that division, some of the elite and near elite guys at 154, Vergil Ortiz won't have those same dimensional advantages that he had at 147. So, for instance, Jermell Charlo, he's 5'11 with a 73-inch reach. Tim Tszyu's a shorter 154 guy. He's about 5'9", so even him is only an inch shorter than Vergil Ortiz Jr. Brian Mendoza's 5'11. Sebastian Fundora is obviously like 6'5", crazy. Erickson Lubin, 5'9.5". Jesus Ramos, 5'11". So these guys are about as tall or maybe even a little taller than Vergil Ortiz Jr. So he doesn't have the same size advantages that he had at 147. So I'm not sure how he's going to do at 154. I mean, I hope that he's feeling healthier and that he is at his best. I mean, keep in mind, this is somebody who was like the Ring Prospect of the Year for 2019. It's just that jump into 154. I mean, it's a big leap from 147. And, you know, Dan Rayfield in that same interview asked him, he said, you know, he asked him what his walk around weight is. Vergil Ortiz said about 170. He said, well, you know, why don't you fight like at middleweight or something? And then Vergil Ortiz said, well, that's just not the reality, man. He's like, because other fights aren't doing that. If I fight at middleweight, I'm going to be basically fighting these damn near heavyweights who shrink down to 160. So, you know, the Vergil Ortiz issue almost speaks to, you know, just the unhealthy but common norm in boxing where guys are shedding 25 plus pounds to get to their fight weight. So maybe 154 does work out for Vergil Ortiz. And, you know, just to let you know, between Vergil Ortiz and Fredrick Lawson, I'm going to go Vergil Ortiz Jr. I'm going to go him via late stoppage. I mean, Ghanaian fighters straight up are difficult to put away. Yeah, I mean, they're very resilient generally. They keep coming. They're very durable. And I think that Fredrick Lawson is going to be able to hang around for several rounds against Vergil Ortiz. But I do expect Ortiz to get the stoppage. I mean, Fredrick Lawson isn't known to be an elite or near elite fighter. So I think that Vergil Ortiz has enough to get him out of there eventually. Although I wouldn't be totally surprised if this fight goes the distance and Vergil Ortiz gets several rounds under his belt, which he could, you know, probably use given the inactivity. And if that does happen, then Lawson will have been the first person to take Ortiz the distance. But again, I'm picking Ortiz to win via stoppage, but I do have questions on whether how viable he is as an elite 154 pounder, given the size of the guys he's going to be going up against. He can still become champion. I do very much believe in his skills. I'm really just concerned about his health at this point. Now you couple that with the fact that he's going to be fighting bigger guys. It's one of those stay tuned and we'll see how this thing plays out. But I just feel like it was unfortunate that we didn't get to see him against more of the top 147 guys. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the Vergil Ortiz Jr. story at this point. And I'm a huge fan of Vergil Ortiz Jr. I mean, he loves music. For those of you who don't know, I have a music channel. It's Woog Talks Music. I love music like I love boxing. And Vergil Ortiz, he's a guitar player and he's also a student of music. So I really appreciate, you know, his wide range of interests, and I'm really pulling for him in terms of his fight career. And plus, he's just an exhilarating and fun fighter to watch. Again, he's just one of the most ferocious punchers, and he's a pretty damn good boxer as well. Again, I'm glad that he's back with Robert Garcia. So let's see what he could do. But this first fight will be his first step back into the arena, and I do expect him to get the stoppage. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.